All right, let's get started. Hi, everybody who joined. Welcome to the workshop. Just a reminder that the workshop is being recorded and the recording will be made available to you afterward. Um, let me. All right, so with that disclaimer out of the way, let's get to the third workshop in this series, finding the programs that are right for you. We've already introduced ourselves, but in case you haven't attended the previous workshops, my name is Samir Patil. I am an associate professor at the Collard School of Computing at the University of Utah, and my partner in organizing and running these workshops is Charles Sentio from Rutgers University. Charles led the couple of workshops that you've been part of before, and today I'm going to be leading you through this workshop on finding programs that are right for you. So let's get started. By the end of this workshop, our goal is for you to be able to reflect on your own goals, constraints, and preferences, allow or provide you with some information about how you gather information on different programs and departments to determine whether they fit you, understand what role advisors and faculty members play in the whole admissions process, and then prepare you to reach out to some of these faculty members regarding your own case. So really, you should think of it as a three-legged stool. One part is about you, one part is about programs and departments, and one part is about faculty members and advisors. So let's start with our first goal, which is things about yourself. Understanding and trying to figure out your own goals, constraints, preferences, and priorities. This is really important because your PhD program is going to be the key to your career after you graduate. So what you should really start with is, where do you see yourself in about 5 years after you graduate from the program? What type of career would you want to go into? Is it academia as a professor? Perhaps you want a job in industry, in either in management or in research. You might want to work for governments or nonprofits. So there are multiple ways in which you can leverage your PhD to forge your career after you graduate. And having a clearer idea of that, you don't have to know exactly what you want to do, but at least some thoughts on what you want to do will, first of all, clarify for yourself, do you really want to do a PhD, and why is it that you want to do a PhD? And in what ways do you want to use your PhD? And once you figure that out, that helps you a lot with determining, well, what kind of programs are going to enable that for you. In addition to where you want to work, you might want to also think about what field or domain of work. Yes, roughly you all want to be in a computing field or domain of work. However, what specifically within that field, right? Do you want to work in AI or ML in terms of fundamental research, or do you want to apply AI or machine learning? Do you want to work in, say, data science and do statistical and data analysis work? Or maybe you want to design chips and work for a hardware company. So which specific field or domain within computing you want to work in also determines which places you might consider for your PhD. And then where do you want to work, right? Is it in the United States, abroad? Where in the United States? So for example, if you really want to work for governments or nonprofits, a lot of jobs in that area tend to be either in state capitals or in Washington, D.C. area. If you want to work, say, in the financial industry, many of those jobs may be in New York City or other big cities. Academia might be in college towns. So trying to figure out kind of where you might want to work may also determine where you would want to go. Okay, so that's futuristic, looking at where you want to go after your PhD. But in order to do your PhD, what are your constraints during your PhD? This is super important because your constraints may be something that rules certain schools out or factors certain schools in. And these are some common constraints that people tend to have. Specific locations, perhaps you have a very strong connection or reason for just staying within certain areas. For instance, some people prefer the West Coast. Some people may want to be, on the East Coast or in college towns. Or do you have any partner or family considerations in terms of either being near them or being able to visit them much more conveniently during, say, holidays or weekends? What about financial considerations? Are you self-financed in terms of getting your PhD? Are you looking for specific types of financial assistance? Do you have a fellowship already? So, for example, some of you may have fellowships from the NSF, or you might have industry funding. So those kinds of things matter as well. And in addition to that, finances might matter when it comes to paying application fees. So many programs will waive their application fees, but some might not. And then having to pay the application fee may be a factor in where you choose to apply. There are other considerations, for example, health, and this can come into play in a variety of ways, right? You may wish to stay near certain medical facilities or doctors, or avoid certain types of weather because of a condition you might have. And these are all individual things that only you know about. But as you can see, right, for example, someone who is allergic to pollen is probably not going to be comfortable applying to a place where those kinds of allergies flare up a lot. And I actually I know a colleague who had to move from his job because his child was severely allergic to stuff that was in the area. So these types of things do matter. Your own academic background and record can also be a constraint, and this is because different programs may have different requirements for what kind of degrees you may need to have, what are specific GPAs or courses, and that may constrain where you choose to apply because of where you're eligible to apply. And there are other process-related factors that may come into play, specific deadlines. So perhaps, there is a very early deadline that you simply cannot make because of other things going on in your life, or most schools that you're interested in don't require the GRE, and the 2 or 3 do. Now you may be faced with a choice of, are you going to stick to not taking the GREs, or will you take the GREs just for a couple of schools? And if you won't, then the schools that absolutely need a GRE will not be able to, you will not be able to apply there, right? And application fees, I already mentioned, different schools may have different fees and different policies regarding waiving them. One thing to keep in mind, constraints can be hard or flexible. So for example, there may be certain things that are just absolutely not negotiable. There may be other things where you may say, well, it depends. I may be able to relax this constraint a little bit, and that will also play a part. So for example, say a family constraint, perhaps, a family member maybe, or a partner may be willing to move, even though that may not be the preferred option. So they think not just about what the constraints are, but is there flexibility, and what kind of flexibility do you have around those constraints? And then in addition to constraints, the next thing is just certain priorities. Because you have a lot of programs, you obviously cannot apply to all of them. So how will you choose? And that requires you to look at different things that you're going to prioritize regarding those programs. So will you prioritize programs that are a better fit with your research interests, or programs that offer certain types of funding? So maybe certain programs offer a fellowship, others offer only RAs, others may offer only teaching assistantships. Will you prioritize based on rankings and reputation? And again, there are pros and cons here, right? Highly ranked programs obviously are desirable, but there's also a lot more competition in terms of getting in. But also, once you're there, you may be forced with a lot of competition in the program itself, or in terms of the expected workload, and that can basically affect your work-life balance. So your work-life balance, for example, say at an Ivy League school, may be quite different from the kind of work-life balance you might expect say at a mid-rank school in the Midwest. And then the other aspect of this is, are these short term? So is it something that you just need to work through for a few months or a couple years? Or is it something that you really want to think about long term, just essentially the entire duration of your PhD? And so how you prioritize these things and how you trade off different things. So for example, maybe a highly ranked program is going to, you will have a lot of chances there, but you may not get any funding, or you may get only teaching assistant funding, whereas you might get funded as a research assistant, but not at a highly ranked program. Or maybe you are getting into a really highly ranked program, but the research area isn't really that interesting to you, whereas some other program, which may not be as highly ranked or may not necessarily be in the location that you want, but is highly aligned with your research interests, and maybe the faculty member is really reputed in the field. So as you can see, determining what your priorities are, what the trade-offs are, will help you rank all of these things when it comes to selecting programs and shortlisting them. I'll tell you my own personal story. When I was applying for PhD programs, I was going through some of these same things, right? What do I prioritize? How do I decide? And partly what I did was I applied to about, I think, 15 or so, but I strategically chose a few that were really highly ranked, a couple, 2 or 3 that I felt were more or less a guaranteed admission, kind of a safety school, and many places in the middle. I didn't really get many application fee waivers, so I also really paid careful attention to what the application fee was. And looking at, I personally was open to going anywhere in the country. So I applied all over the country without really necessarily thinking about, as long as I was prepared to live there, and which was mostly most places, that was not really a factor in my own application decisions. Additionally, I also took into account, well, does this university or does this program do the faculty do the kinds of research that I do? And have I been able to get any replies or encouragement from any of these faculty members? And these are some of the things that we'll get to later in the session, but I just wanted to give you some sense of how these things may come into play when you're trying to shortlist, okay, where exactly should I apply among all these choices I have? And it can be a difficult decision, and multiple factors. You do need to take multiple factors into account, not just focus on a single one. All right, so this is all about just figuring out your own constraints, priorities, needs. What about the programs themselves? So you are one part of the equation here. The programs are the other part of the equation. Where do you get information about these programs? And first thing, before you even try to find information about a specific program, you should recognize that computing programs may exist at multiple places in a university. Typically, you would have only a single computer science department, but computer science or related research may also be done in computer engineering. The computer science department may be in the School of Arts, liberal arts, or it may be in engineering, or it may be its own school or department. You also have related programs like information or informatics. Some of them may also be in library schools. Or you may have more specialized programs like robotics or cybersecurity. And just to give you a few examples, if you take University of Washington does computing-oriented research in at least 3 places that are in very different departments across the university. There's the Human-Centered Design and Engineering, which is in engineering. There's the Computer Science and Engineering School, which is its own standalone entity. And there's the Information School. Georgia Tech, for example, has a School of Cybersecurity and Public Policy that was started recently. Carnegie Mellon has the Robotics Institute. It has actually 3 different places where the word computer science is used. There's the Human Computer Interaction Institute. MIT has the Media Lab, not typically doesn't even have the word computing or computer science in it, but they do a lot of research that is directly relevant for computing. Interestingly, NYU has computer science in actually many places, and it can even be confusing. So there's the Coran Institute that has computer science. There's the Tandon School of Engineering that has computer science and engineering degree. And there is the electrical and computer engineering degree. So the reason I'm telling you these and giving you these examples is don't simply look for computer science and be done. You may notice that, first of all, it may be called something different, or it may be in a completely different entity. And so really figuring out where the kinds of research that you want to do exist in a university may sometimes take some figuring out, and it may even exist in multiple places. The other important thing, and this is different from undergraduate admissions, is if there are multiple programs in university, they typically have their own admissions processes. So you may need to apply separately to each of them. So as I mentioned, right, for example, University of Washington, if you want to apply to all of these programs, you will have to submit 3 different applications. I think somebody needs to mute. Okay. So you'll have to submit 3 separate different applications to each of these programs. So that's it's different from just applying to a single entity at the undergraduate level. And so that's really important for you to keep in mind. And of course, they each will have their own application fee in case they don't waive it, and very separate requirements in terms of what they want you to submit. There's, of course, commonalities, but there may also be material differences. Okay. Now, one of the ways in which you can find these computing programs is different kinds of rankings. The most famous is the US News and World Report. And US News and World Report at the graduate level will rank universities according to area. So computer science has its own ranking. Computer engineering will have its own ranking. So these are, as you can see, these are the latest computer science rankings showing the top 15 places to do computer science. However, US News also will do some area rankings. So they may have separate rankings for sub-research fields. Or I think there's 3 or 4 research fields within computer science that are ranked separately. And these rankings are based on, a lot of the ranking is based on peer assessment. It's really the reputation. So if you want to think of it as kind of brand recognition of the university. So if you can see here, you will probably know of all of these places because they're famous, right? Harvard, Stanford, Caltech, Carnegie Mellon. Another ranking, which is not based on peer assessment, but on just purely publications, research publications of the faculty members in their computing programs, is CS rankings. This is used quite a bit specifically for computer science programs. And as you can see here, if you see the list on the right-hand side, these are the top 21, currently top 21 schools for computer science. And this is not, there is a lot of correlation with the US News ranking, but it's not exactly the same. The important thing that I want to point out here is here on the left, you can see currently it is showing rankings based on all areas within computing. However, maybe you're interested in rankings just for the specific area. So for example, if you want to do research in computer networks, you may be interested in how schools are ranked just for computer networking. And what you can do is turn on or off these boxes on the left in order to obtain those rankings. And you may actually be quite surprised that the overall rankings and the area-specific rankings may be quite different. So I can give an example of my own institution, University of Utah. University of Utah overall in computer science is ranked, I think, just in the low 30s. However, if you select just visualization, it is ranked number 1. Similarly, University of California, Irvine is ranked very highly in, say, software engineering, or human-computer interaction. Carnegie Mellon is ranked very highly, just as it is for the overall ranking. So what I'm trying to essentially tell you is, don't just pay attention to overall computer science rankings, but pay a lot of attention to the specific areas in which you want to focus on, because schools that may not necessarily be highly ranked in an overall ranking may be really ranked really high in niche areas, and maybe doing some very impactful research in the specific areas where you want to go. Another ranking is called CS Open Rankings, and this is kind of a meta ranking. It combines multiple sources of ranking, and here also you can see it lets you select or deselect specific areas, and then it shows you what the ranking is for US News as well as CS rankings, but also looking at best paper awards by the faculty. And so this is another source that you can use to compare different programs. So just to summarize things about rankings, because rankings are talked about a lot, specific to computer science, there's three main sources you can use: the US News rankings, CS rankings, and CS Open. I highly encourage you to not just look at the overall ranking, but also the lower level ranking of the specific areas, and then additionally higher level ranking of the university itself. So you might be surprised to know, but Harvard University, if you look at CS rankings, is ranked in actually below University of Utah. It's like in the mid-30s in computer science. But as we all know, Harvard University, just as a university, is highly reputed, and there's a lot of brand recognition for Harvard, right? So you need to kind of take both of those things into account, the lower level area specific thing and the higher level university itself. Most importantly, use rankings just as one factor, because all different ways in which schools can be ranked against each other, they all have pros and cons and caveats and imperfections. So it is not, the rankings are not gospel. You can use them to get some sense of comparative rankings across areas or across programs, but they should just be one factor among many when you weigh your choices. And especially, as I said, right, the difference between, say, something ranked, a place ranked number 18 versus 22 is more or less going to be minimal. Or even some university ranked 18 versus 34 might also be minimal. And as we just discussed, right, a university ranked overall, say 32, may be ranked in the top 5 in the specific area that you want to work in. And so use rankings. If you do use rankings, use them as a guideline, not as a hard and fast way of, cutting programs off, filtering them, or things like that. All right. Now let's get to the admissions processes. So you will obviously, the rankings give you some information about programs. The admissions processes you're going to have to find on the program's website itself. So once you locate the programs of your interests at a university, you should really pay careful attention to their admissions section. They will, and just general information about the program itself. They'll tell you what are the main research areas. Not all programs have all research areas, although the big areas will be common across all of them. They will give you a list of their faculty members, along with what kind of research do these faculty do. Sometimes the research area information will also say, in this research area, there are these faculty members who work on projects related to this research. You can check out the latest news about newsworthy research that they've done. This could be things that was published recently, won awards, maybe they got grant funding, maybe something in the popular press that covered the research. And then specifically to you, you can take a look at the degrees and courses that they offered. Because even so, for example, again, taking Utah as an example, you can do a computing PhD in 2 different ways. There is a PhD in computer science, but there is also a PhD in computing, and the PhD in computing has many different tracks like artificial intelligence or data science or human-centered computing. And so yes, most likely it will be the PhD in computer science that you might want, or PhD in information or informatics. But it could also be something else. Again, so I can give an example of University of California, Irvine. There's a PhD in computer science, but there's also a PhD in informatics. But if you want to do software engineering, you're going to be applying to the informatics department and getting the PhD in informatics. And the degree itself is actually called PhD in information and computer science. So this is the kind of detail that you will find on the program itself. And then for the various degrees, they will tell you their requirements and milestones that you will need to fulfill. And this could be what is the coursework that is needed. If you have taken some graduate level coursework, or if you're coming in with a master's degree, will they count any of that? When will you take the qualifying exam? What kind of questions are in the qualifying exam? What process? So this may be detail that you might not necessarily need, but maybe you do, right? So it really depends on what kind of constraints that you're working with, and that this information is obviously going to be available. And then importantly for you, the most immediate thing you're going to need is what is the process for applying for their doctoral program? Do they need a GRE? What is the deadline? What is the application fee? Will they waive it? Is the waiver automatic, or do you have to request it? You should really pay careful attention to that. And it might also, once you start considering a few programs in your shortlist, you might also find it useful to make a spreadsheet in which you keep this information for your own records afterwards, because you will forget once you look at 5 or 6 of these, things will start blending in and you won't necessarily remember which programs have what deadlines if you want to recall that on your own afterwards. When you're looking at information on the program, keep in mind that programs can be looked at kind of from a collective view, just the whole program, the department, school, institution. And here's where you're going to be looking at what are the different research areas they offer, how many faculty members, reputation. And one aspect of the reputation, as we just discussed, is their ranking. What kind of culture do they have? Is it a collegial culture where people are collaborating a lot with each other? Or is it every lab does its own thing? And these kinds of things, they may not necessarily be obvious from just the information, but kind of a heuristic is typically programs that are really highly ranked and highly reputed tend to have a very intense culture where you are expected to work quite hard and quite a lot. And it may have information on current graduate students, so you may want to even reach out to them if you really want to know more about that. Definitely, they will tell you about what kind of financial support is available for PhD programs. And in computing, most PhD programs fund most of their PhD admits, right? Either as a TA, RA, fellowship, or in some other form. They will tell you more about the location. So if you've never actually been to that place, you can get to know a little bit more about what is it like to be in this town, in this city. They may also tell you about the various facilities, what kind of buildings they have, what type of labs or equipment. So for example, I was recently at Carnegie Mellon University and we got a demo of all kinds of robots in their robotics lab. And so having those types of, if you want to work in robotics or do research in robotics, having those types of facilities and resources handy and readily available might matter to you. Then the other view here is the individual view of the faculty and labs. And this is where you may need to consult pages of individual faculty, individual labs, and look at what kind of projects are they working on. So they'll list their individual projects. Are they collaborating with each other within the school or internationally, nationally with others? Are they connected to industry? So for example, in my school, many faculty have funding from Amazon or Google. They're working directly with them and other industry partners. I believe one of my colleagues is also doing consulting for Roblox. You can take a look at what the students are currently engaged in, but sometimes they may also tell you about their alumni. So you could take a look at, okay, in this lab, students who graduated, where did they get their jobs? Or did they go to academia? Are they in industry? Are they doing something else? And you can also follow links to specific publications and see, okay, is this something that interests you? Is it the kind of work that you want to do? So this is really all that you can use to shortlist or filter programs. Obviously you cannot apply to anything. However, I would recommend that you cast a wide net when you are creating your initial shortlist. Don't just say, okay, I'm going to apply to 5, so I need to select 5 right now. You may even initially shortlist as many as 30 or 40. Essentially include a program if you think you would go there if it was the only program that offered you admissions initially, right? You can, as I said in my personal example, make sure that you're covering kind of a spectrum across the ranking, because the top programs in the rankings are going to be highly competitive. And maybe the ones that are toward the bottom may not necessarily be a good fit career-wise, but may still be acceptable. And then once you have created this initial shortlist, research the programs using some of the information that I just presented earlier about their website, individual faculty, to then try to come up with further shortlisting or filtering that you're going to reach out to faculty, which we'll get to in a second, right? So in addition to information about the program, obviously you will also take into account your own constraints and priorities when coming up with this initial shortlist. So before we get to how you will use your shortlist to reach out to specific faculty members, let's first understand how advisors actually fit into the admissions process, because understanding that is really important, not just to selecting programs, but also to interacting with potential advisors. So, and maybe some of you know this already, but just in case you don't know, faculty members typically will evaluate PhD applications to look for potential advisees if they're taking potential advisees. And candidates of interest, then faculty members may actually sometimes reach out to them directly, or they may let the admissions committee know if they're not themselves on the admissions committee. So that's one proactive way in which faculty members evaluate applications. Not all do, some do. For example, if a faculty member is not taking advisees actively, probably won't evaluate anybody. Some or faculty members who are on the admissions committee obviously will evaluate all applications. Sometimes admissions committee members will reach out to specific faculty and ask them to evaluate applications that, for example, may have mentioned their name or are directly relevant to their research areas. So even though faculty members who may not be directly on the admissions committee, they may get asked by the admissions committee to provide additional input. Important thing to note is that no individual faculty member makes a decision, either to admit you or to give you funding. They can have a strong influence, but they're not going to decide things on their own. There are many factors that go into ultimately making admissions decisions, and it's the admissions committee is the entity that makes those decisions. Now, what do faculty members look for when they're evaluating potential advisees? Obviously, match, right? Do you match their research interests? Are you going to be able to work on the kinds of research that they do? Looking at your letters of recommendation and just in general, your accomplishments. Where did you get your degree? What was your GPA? What kind of coursework have you taken? They may also look at availability of funding, either from their side or from your side, right? Do you have funding? Or there are people who come in with, as I said, right, with NSF or industry funding or other sources, or the faculty member may have funding and is actively looking to fund students on that funding. They may also have had prior contact or discussion with the applicant. And then do they have available bandwidth to take on additional students? So somebody who already has 10 students may not necessarily be looking for an 11th advisee, as opposed to somebody who's looking to actively grow their lab, maybe looking for multiple students. Somebody who's going on a sabbatical may not necessarily be looking to take on someone immediately because they're going away for a year, and things like that. So there are multiple factors that a faculty member may consider when evaluating your application and determining, are you a potential match for them? So with that background, what we recommend is, once you have this initial longer short list of programs and have identified potential faculty members who match your research interests or who you're interested in working with, you should reach out to them and pay attention to titles when you're looking for potential matches. So this was something that I didn't really know as well when I applied, but I think this is super important to know. Not all faculty members that are on the faculty page are the same or have different role, have the same role. So what you really want to focus on is faculty members who are tenured or tenured track, because these are the faculty members typically who do research and advise PhD students. In many other places, there may also be research faculty who also, as well as the name implies, they do exclusively just research, whereas tenure and tenure track faculty do research and teach. In many places, research faculty can also advise PhD students. In other places, research faculty may advise PhD students, but they may need a tenure track faculty member as a co-advisor. And these are some of the titles that will tell you whether somebody's tenure or tenure track or other kinds. So assistant or associate professors or full professors are tenure track. Assistants haven't received tenure yet. Associates and full are more senior with tenure. And then there are further seniority ranks, like somebody may be a distinguished or endowed professor, maybe an administrator, as in department chair, dean, associate chair. Professor emeritus is essentially faculty members who have retired. So they are still active and doing research more or less on their own. They're highly unlikely to be taking new students. So you probably wouldn't want to reach out to them. However, and same with administrators. Typically, administrators focus just on management, and not always though. So you should look at whether they have current students. But I think the most likely faculty who are most likely to take students are tenured or tenure track faculty at the assistant, associate, full level. Distinguished faculty, of course, these are famous people in the field, but remember that they may also have a lot of students who are interested in working with them, and may also have a lot of students already. And of course, research faculty. So they may be designated as assistant, associate, or full research professor. Sometimes they may be called visiting professors or postdoctoral fellows. Now, if you're reaching out to research faculty, visiting professors or postdoctoral fellows are likely not going to take students, because as the name visiting implies they're temporarily, or postdoctoral fellows are essentially the next step or next academic job people get after their PhD before they become professors. So they don't have their own students. Similarly, there are faculty members whose main role is related to just teaching, and they typically also do not advise PhD students or have funding for them. So these faculty members may be marked as assistant, associate, or full teaching professors. Some places call them lecturers or senior lecturers, instructors. They may also be designated as adjunct professors or clinical professors, professor of practice. Now, typically adjunct professors are, for example, somebody who's in industry but is teaching a specific course. Professor of practice may also be someone similar, depending on which department. The title may be different. There are cases when adjunct professors are also tenure track faculty. Oftentimes, this tends to be when faculty are in multiple departments. So for example, a place that has a robotics department and a computer science department, somebody who's primarily in the robotics department may also be an adjunct faculty in the computer science department. And so if you see adjunct professor, pay a little bit more attention to determining, okay, are they adjunct because they're just teaching, or are they adjunct because their main appointment is in some other program? And if it is in some other program, then you need to think about whether you want to apply. If you're interested in working with them, which program should you apply for? And you might also want to consult them directly about that. So this is really important because if you're reaching out to faculty members, you want to reach out to the right faculty members. And oftentimes from the faculty pages or lists, this is not immediately apparent. So paying attention to the titles and also looking at the web pages of the individual faculty would help. And so when you're looking at the profiles of these faculties members, individual faculty members, obviously there's the information on the program site itself, but you can check out their Google Scholar. You can sort their publications by year and look at the latest ones. You may want to read the titles and abstracts of the papers that they've published recently to see, okay, is this something that interests you? Is it the kind of work that you want to do? There may also be news related to latest faculty research. Either they got some kind of a best paper award, or they have grant funding for their research, or as I said before, the press covered some of their findings. Once you have done that, then think about, do you fit with them? So of all the faculty members that you looked at, whom would you want to work with as an advisor? Are they actually in your area of interest? Obviously, that's super important. Are they pursuing any projects that are of interest to you? Do you see yourself as being a co-author on their recent work or the follow-up work that might come from their recent publications? Do you know them, or maybe they're current or past students, and maybe not know them personally, but maybe you may have heard of them by reputation? All of these things will come into play when you think about, okay, is this going to be someone with whom I might want to pursue my PhD? And once you've identified that, that's when you should feel free to reach out to them, typically via email. You should, and if you are reaching out to advisors, prepare a really brief email. Just say who you are, say that you're interested in being their advisee, and most importantly, mention why is it that you're interested, right? What is the fit? What is the match between your interest, your background, what you want to do, and what they do or what they have done? Attach your resume, and then politely ask, if they're interested in taking new students. Really important to keep this email brief, right? No more than, say, 3 or 4 sentences, because advisors or faculty members get a lot of email. And first of all, if it's a long email, they may not read it at all. But even if it's a short email, sometimes they may never get to it. So keeping it short helps you make sure that they will at least read or skim it. Including your resume gives them the opportunity, if they are interested in what you said, they can look at more information in the resume itself. Most importantly, we highly recommend not using LLMs like ChatGPT to construct these emails. As somebody who gets a lot of emails, it is very apparent when somebody has not actually put in the effort to write that email themselves, but is using some kind of a template that was given to them by a program. And same, even if you do use a template, and clearly most of what you write will be same, make sure to personalize it. Don't just write a sentence where all you're doing is copy pasting the titles of person X when you're writing to person X and person Y when you're writing to person Y. That is also oftentimes really obvious, because just copy pasting the title without paying attention to whether it fits what you're writing just doesn't work. So make sure that, yes, you can have sort of a template of a brief 3 or 4 sentences, but when you do send it out, pay attention that it is properly personalized to that faculty member, not just a simple copy paste of a few fields. And do your homework. Check their web pages. Some of them may say, do this before contacting me, or some of them may say, please do not contact me before you apply. And if that's what they've said, respect that. Because again, they may have very good reasons for why they do certain things. They may actually just look for applicants after applications, or they may just be really overwhelmed and may not be able to answer every single email they get. Or maybe they've already given you the answers to the questions you might want to ask them on their webpage. You should be familiar with the research that they do, at least have skimmed recent papers, titles, and abstracts, if not the whole paper. And then in your email, you should identify which projects or which specific papers interested you most, but importantly, say why. It doesn't have to be very long. It can just be a sentence, but simply saying, I was interested in your paper X is much less informative than saying, I was really interested in this paper because it is closely aligned with the kinds of work that I did it when I was a research undergrad in this lab during, or it fits the project that I did for my course. So as you can see, just adding that half a sentence extra really makes the connection much more obvious, because anybody can just say, I'm interested in this paper, but not everybody can say the same thing about why that you can. And then another thing would be, if by any chance any of your letter writers or someone else knows these faculty members that you want to reach out to, you can ask, would they be willing to introduce you? And that may actually help you in getting replies. Speaking of replies, use replies from advisors as a factor in deciding. So that long list that you came up with first, once you started emailing some of these professors, take a look at what kind of replies you're getting, and maybe getting a really super enthusiastic reply from a faculty member obviously is a positive sign, and you may want to prioritize applying to that university. Now, faculty members, if they reply and are not overly enthusiastic, you may require reading between the lines. Are they simply, basically, are you not a fit? Or are they politely saying that, your profile may not necessarily fit their research group or their program? Now that takes some practice, and it's not necessarily obvious. So don't sweat it, but just say, just be aware that if you don't get a overly enthusiastic reply, just pay a very careful attention to what they might be trying to tell you politely. Also, do not spam the entire department or even all faculty members in a given area by sending emails at the same time. Just as you decided on prioritizing your schools, maybe in the given program, prioritize which faculty members and then email them one at a time. If you don't get a reply, say within a week, either you can remind them politely, don't remind more than once, or you may just move on. Then it's okay to move on to your next choice. Sometimes faculty members themselves may reply and say things like, well, I'm not taking students, or I don't think this is really a fit for me, but here are a couple of my colleagues you might want to contact. So you can also use that information. And then once you've done this, and then if you end up applying to that university, in your statement of purpose, you should highlight fit with the faculty members with whom you've corresponded, who have replied to you. Encouragingly, you can indicate how your interests fit their research, and that can actually strengthen your application. Importantly, if I would say, do not ask directly for faculty members for a one-on-one call, especially before you apply, because there's just so many emails that faculty members get that they may not even have time for a one-on-one call. But if they reach out to you and say, hey, I'm interested, and could we talk more, then be prepared to do that. And in that case, make sure you focus on determining the fit with the faculty member. You can have some questions ready to ask them about what are they doing in terms of their current research, or what do they have planned in the near future for research projects, what their advising style is like, what do they expect from their students and advisees, and then describe how you think you're going to be a fitting candidate for their lab or their research. You can ask them to put you in touch with their current students. So you can ask what the experiences of the current students are like. As we said, let the faculty members request this conversation rather than you emailing and saying, hey, would you want to talk with me one-on-one or do a video conference call or a phone call? And some of them may, and others may not. Having said all of this, know that it is quite common not to receive a reply at all from faculty members for a variety of reasons. And I can tell you, we're all overwhelmed by the amount of email we get. Sometimes emails just don't even make it to the inbox. Maybe it arrives at a very unsuitable time when I'm dealing with multiple deadlines. And then later on, a week later, I never actually then end up getting to it. As I already said before, some faculty members just on principle wait to correspond with applicants after applying rather than before. So there's a myriad of reasons why you may not receive a reply. Do not take that personally. Most likely, the reason has absolutely nothing to do with you or your application. And so do not take that as a sign that they're not interested in you or you do not fit. So basically, an encouraging reply is a positive sign, but no reply at all is not necessarily a bad sign at all. You can still use all of that other information on their pages, information about the program, your own interests, to decide whether or not you want to apply to that program, even if you have not received a reply from any faculty members in that program at all. All right, so we covered a lot of information. Now, I want to, before I remind you of what's coming up in the series next, why don't we take any questions that might have come in on chat, or feel free to unmute your mic and ask. Are there any questions in chat, Charles?
Not that haven't been answered. I'm answering one now, but we encourage you all to use the Q&A in addition to the chat, or a Q&A instead of the chat. But I don't see anything here that isn't answered. But chime in with your questions via audio if you'd like.
Oh, I think I do see a question about when would be a good time to send these emails. So typically if you're applying, let's say this December, it's best to email faculty members sometime between late September to kind of Thanksgiving, or maybe even as late as just before applying. It's good to have that long of a period, because that way if you're waiting about a week or so before writing the next faculty member in your list, it gives you enough of a window to write to a few faculty members. Obviously, if it's closer to the deadline, you may shorten how long you wait before you move on to the next to emailing the next faculty member in your list. But I think the question was asking about if you're applying in a year and a half from now, writing faculty members now itself may not necessarily be the most productive use of your time. However, maybe you want to do an internship with them over the summer just for experience, or something that you want to then use to strengthen your application. In that case, you can reach out to them with that specific request, but that's not necessarily about PhD applications. Are there other questions?
I did turn the Q&A on. I didn't realize that the option was not available to you all.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, thank you. So, let's say I'm applying, but as I am an international student, so I have some constraint, like my budget is limited, so I can't apply so many universities as possible. So in that case, like maybe I want to apply like 3 universities, but to secure my position and funding, do you prefer first contacting with a supervisor, potential supervisor, and uh, seek their confirmation, or you just want to go for a central application process? Which
Okay.
one would be the best?
Okay, so I think, thanks for that question. I think there are multiple facets in it. Let me take them one by one. You're right that the procedures and rules for international students may be slightly different. So absolutely pay attention to your own case in terms of what applies to you. There are schools that will, these schools will waive application fees for international students if asked. So you might want to still email and figure out if there's a possibility to get a fee waiver. So that's one. I would say if you're applying to a smaller number of schools, then it's probably even more important to reach out to potential advisors, because that way you are going to optimize and try to apply to schools where you have received some kind of an encouraging reply. That said, no faculty member can confirm anything to you, not ahead of time and not even applying afterwards they apply, because as I said before, individual faculty members do not make admissions decisions. Those decisions are made by a committee. And so individual faculty members can strongly influence it. So that's one aspect. So they can't confirm and say, oh yeah, you should apply and you'll definitely get in, even before or after you're applying.
Oh, sometimes I saw there's lab, they have position open in their labs. Oh, what about that case?
It's the same, right? When they say positions open, unless if it's a PhD student position, that needs to go through
Yeah.
it. If it's a research scientist or some kind of position where they're paying you hourly, then it's not a PhD student position. When they say PhD positions open, what they mean is that you should apply and they are taking new students, but the application is still going to be evaluated by the applications committee. So that's one. The other thing is, they may have, even if they have said encouraging things and saying, yeah, you are a great fit and I would love to see your application. Maybe they have one position and 6 fitting people end up applying. So even if you are a great fit, they cannot, and so are other 5 people, and now they have to decide what do they do. And so, like I said, right, so no faculty member can actually guarantee you anything unless the only people who can guarantee you admission is when you get a letter from the admissions committee. That said, encouraging replies from faculty members are really useful, and that can be useful for prioritizing. I would highly also suggest applying to more than just 3 schools in general. So it is, PhD admissions are competitive. And so the more schools you apply to and the more kinds of schools, right? Some in the top, some in the mid, some toward the lower end of the spectrum, especially from a ranking perspective, especially in your area, you are increasing your chances that you will get into at least one of them. Because what you don't want to, and I'm guessing, to happen is you apply to just 3 or 4 and then none of those applications are successful and now you have to apply all over again next year.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? We are about at time. So if there aren't any other big questions, I want to remind you, let's just what's coming up next in this series. The next workshop in a couple of weeks is about your personal statement. So now that you've found the programs and identified advisors, how do you write that into your personal statement and also describe your research interests and backgrounds? So start thinking about what that statement is going to highlight before you come to that workshop in a couple of weeks. And then in case you haven't identified your letter writers yet, a reminder that you should start a list of for them and start asking them already. There are also other opportunities. So there's the CRA engagement and awareness series, that the next workshop in that series is about an AMA about research that's coming up. And all of these QR codes will take you to the registration for this. Importantly, please complete the post-workshop survey for this workshop. We have already used your feedback from the surveys and the previous two workshops to improve this one. So we value your feedback and we take that into account as we prepare these sessions for you. So we really would appreciate it if you can complete this this short survey on this workshop. Charles, could you paste that link also in the chat? Yeah, so that would also, you can either use the QR code or click on the link in the chat. And then you can stay connected with CRA on social media of your choice. With that, we will end this session. We are happy to stay on another 5-10 minutes if people have additional questions or need information that we haven't yet covered. But otherwise, I wish you a great rest of the week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.